Hi everyone. In today's video I am talking about fanfiction, and in particular I want to talk about some of the ways in which fanfic can be better than original fiction. And now, before I get a slew of angry comments below the video about this, I will probably do another video at some point in the future where I talk about how original fiction can be better than fanfic, to talk about the pros and cons coming at this from the other side. For today, I just want to focus on the good things about fanfic. In case you're not aware, fanfiction is where fans of a work, whether that's a book, a TV show, a film, a game, or just about anything else, take the concepts and characters of that work and then create new stories using these elements of somebody else's intellectual property. So if you want to write a story about Hermione Granger going on adventures in the TARDIS, that's fanfiction. If you want to explore what might have happened after the end of your favourite book by writing your own sequel to it, that's fanfiction. If you want to imagine what might have happened if an event in a story had happened differently, fanfiction. Fanfiction is written by the fans of whatever the thing is for the enjoyment of other fans of that thing, and it's shared with them, usually over the internet these days, for free. In terms of the quality of fanfiction, there is a huge range. Some fanfiction stories are absolutely amazing, well-crafted works of art that stand out as masterpieces of writing. Some are so poorly written and clunky that I have to hit the back button after a couple of paragraphs because it hurts to read it. Most is somewhere in the middle of this range. Probably not the greatest thing ever written, but thoroughly enjoyable, something you can read and have a good time doing so. And I would say that this is also true of traditionally published original fiction too. Some is amazing, some is terrible, and most it's somewhere in between. And there's a lot of subjectivity that comes into play with both original and fan fiction. So a story that one person absolutely loves won't appeal at all to somebody else. The problem I find is that a lot of people who are not part of the fanfiction community try to talk about fanfic as though all of it is somehow represented by its worst elements. And that is not fair to the huge number of very talented writers who produce a wealth of highly entertaining stories for free. But I'm not here to focus on the negative side today. I want to talk about some of the ways that fanfiction is great, especially when compared to original fiction. The first is that it's an excellent training ground for amateur writers. There are a lot of authors out there who started out writing fanfic and then moved on to writing their own original fiction. And like any other skill, writing is something that improves with practice. The more you write, the better you will be at writing. And fanfiction absolutely counts towards that. So if you write 100,000 word fanfic, you will learn a lot about the craft of constructing a long plot and holding together a narrative over that scale. And that is just as applicable if you decide later that you're going to try writing an original novel. If you are a young writer or somebody who is just learning the craft, then all writing is going to help with that. And I highly recommend using fanfic as a way to explore your own tastes and work out what works for you in terms of writing habits. Another thing that is great for fanfic is reaching other readers and getting instant feedback. You can post a chapter of a story up online on a site like Archive of Our Own, and you can get comments within a couple of hours, especially if you're writing for one of the really, really popular films or TV shows. This is a fantastic way to get encouragement in your writing. If people are reading your story and clicking on that little kudos button and leaving comments saying nice things, that is going to give you such an incentive to keep writing the story. Compare this to original fiction. When you're writing an original novel, the process can take a very, very long time. Unless you are part of a writing group and sharing your work in progress with them on a regular basis, you could spend months or years on a draft before you ever show it to another human being. If you get a publisher to agree to take your book, there's a good chance it could be another year before that book comes out and you start seeing reader reactions, reader reviews. And that takes its toll. Even established authors can sometimes find that the process of writing a book is long and slow. If you are stuck at a difficult point in your original work, it can feel disheartening. And then post a quick chapter of fanfic or a little one-shot and you get some nice comments. You get people complimenting your writer, and as an author you can think, yeah, I can write stuff people enjoy. I really should keep going with my original work because people like my writing. The instant gratification of fanfic comments can give you the impetus to continue with the original work with its much slower feedback cycle. Fanfic can also be a fun playground to try out different styles and approaches to storytelling. In fanfic, you get structures to stories that you just don't see in original fiction. An example of this is 5+1 stories. These are stories where there are either 6 scenes or 6 chapters, depending on how long they are. And in the first 5, a particular thing happens. And then in the last one, the opposite, or a contradictory thing happens. So the story could be 5 times character A lied to their parents, and 1 time they admitted the truth. Or 5 times these characters were interrupted attempting to do a thing, and 1 time they managed to complete it. This is a style of story I have not seen anywhere outside of fanfiction. You also get drabbles, which are stories written in precisely 100 words. At least that's the old definition. Some people use drabble for just it's a short story. But writing a drabble is a brilliant writing exercise if you want to get practice getting your point across quickly and efficiently. Coming back to my earlier point about writing being good practice, trying to get a coherent story in 100 words is an amazing exercise if you want to learn how to write short stories where every word counts. But beyond using it as a training exercise, it's also great if you want to write something but you don't have a massive amount of free time to dedicate to a huge novel-length work. And these styles and formats spring up organically out of the fanfiction community. Someone does a thing, they write a story, and somebody else reads it and thinks, oh, that was interesting, I could do something similar. And from there it grows until it spans across all of the different fandoms. And this same sort of thing happens with ideas and concepts as well as the format itself. For example, soulmate fics. These are stories set in a world where everyone, or almost everyone, gets matched with their perfect soulmate. And there is some way, some mechanism, that you know when you meet your soulmate. The most common version of this that I've seen is where every person has the first words that their soulmate will say to them written somewhere on their body. But there are a ton of variants on this theme. Like, the character might have their soulmate's name written on their wrist or something. Or both people in a soulmate pair might have an identical mark of some symbol. Or people might see in black and white until they meet their soulmate, and then suddenly everything becomes colour. People take this idea and they run with it, adding their own changes, their own little complications to the concept, exploring what it would mean, how it would impact a society or a setting, expanding it and moving it on. And you will now find soulmate fits across vastly unrelated fandoms. But if you start reading one of these, you'll go into it knowing something about the setting, something about the situation, and you'll probably have a bit of a clue about what's likely to happen in the plot. And that's another thing that fanfic lets you do that original fiction doesn't. You get to take shortcuts. When you're writing a work of fanfic, the readers already care about the characters, or they wouldn't be on whatever site it is looking for fanfic of them. They already understand the world and have insight into the backstory and the history between the characters, which means as a writer, you don't have to spend time on world building and scene setting. You can just assume that your readers already know all of that. And that makes it easier to just jump into whatever it is you want the story to be about. When you're writing original fiction, there is a challenge trying to make your readers care about your characters and the situations that they find themselves in from an early point of the story to get them invested. With fanfic, you can shortcut a lot of this process, and as a writer, you can focus your time and effort on the plot or the emotions of the characters, and that can be really freeing. And these assumptions of knowledge can be useful in another way: dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is where you have something that your readers are aware of, but that the characters aren't. And this is usually played either for humour or for tension. So let's take a short example. In the original work, the film or the TV show that the fanfic is based around, a character might be revealed to be a bad guy as a dramatic plot twist. Going into the fanfic, the readers will know that this character is the bad guy, but the other characters in the story might not. And as a writer, you can play on this by showing the interactions between the heroes and the bad guy, with the hero putting trust in the bad guy, or giving them information which could be used against them. The readers will see all of this unfold, and they will be waiting for the other shoe to drop. The knowledge that a betrayal is coming adds to the tension, in the same way that watching a countdown clock slowly ticking towards 0 tells you that an explosion is coming. Something is going to happen, and it will be devastating for the characters, and the readers are watching with bated breath for this moment to happen. So you can get dramatic irony in original fiction, but the meta-knowledge that fanfiction readers have around the world of the story gives fanfiction writers a great opportunity to explore these techniques to an extent that would be challenging to achieve in original fiction. The other thing that is freeing in all of this is that no one is going to hold you as a writer of fanfic to normal literary conventions. When you publish a book, there are certain expectations about things like plot and pacing and length. When I sent one of my books to the publisher, I had already done a lot of editing to get it down to what I felt was a reasonable length, trimming away anything that I felt could be safely trimmed without diminishing the quality of the story. And then my editor told me to get rid of another 10,000 words. Most publishers and most genres have standard ranges of book lengths, and you are expected to fit within those boundaries. With fanfic, you can write a 100-word drabble, you could write a 500,000 word epic. No one is going to tell you, no, story's too long, gotta cut some stuff out. There is a lot less focus on drama and tension. In a traditionally published novel, an editor will probably tell you to cut scenes that don't move the plot forward. But in fanfic, it's perfectly fine to write 30,000 words of two characters throwing snowballs, drinking hot chocolate, and just talking about their histories, their childhood, while they're snowed in at a cabin in the mountains. It doesn't have to be all about plot. And I think that's interesting that there is a huge number of fanfics that are about domestic fluff, or coffee shop AUs, or other things along those lines. So domestic fluff stories are basically, these characters live together, here's a few thousand words of them cooking dinner, watching TV, and just going for walks in the park. Coffee shop AUs or alternate universes are, this character works in a coffee shop, this character is a customer. They meet and fall in love. These sort of stories rarely have a more complicated plot than that. There may be some complications, there may be a misunderstanding, or one character might see another with a sister and think that those two are a couple. So you get things like that, which can mean that these characters can't possibly get together for another 50,000 words. But often the stories just focus on the day-to-day interactions of people. And in original works, there is often a big need for tension, action, fast-paced plot. If you look at long-term TV shows, they are often written so that each episode, each season has got to be more exciting than the last. Every season has got to up the tension, the stakes get bigger and bigger. The characters get thrown from one dire situation to the next without a chance to pause and recover. In fanfiction, the characters get breathing space. There is a category of fanfic called hurt comfort, which is exactly what it sounds like. A character gets hurt, either physically or emotionally, or both, and then they get comforted by another character or group of characters. In mainstream media, a lot of the time the focus is on the hurt, the action, the major events which are happening, which would traumatise most people. In fanfiction, there is an opportunity to address the aftermath. And this lack of imposed rules means that people can write whatever they want. And sometimes that is the emotional resolution to events that are shown in a TV show or a film. Sometimes it is something bizarre and silly that just happened to amuse them. There is a concept called crackfic, which is a fairly vague term, but essentially means the author is there saying, yeah, I know this is silly and ridiculous, but it amused me. It might amuse you too. Here you go. And this can be characters doing bizarre things or interacting in strange ways. Several years ago, I came across a mailing group, it was several years ago, dedicated to writing fanfic about the concept of Jack O'Neill, the character from Stargate SG-1, being romantically involved with a bowl. No one in that group took the idea seriously. It had started as someone's joke, and they ran with it, writing these ridiculous little pieces purely for the joke of it. Fanfiction writers will write about anything, and that's the silly stuff. And sometimes it's the stuff that is going on in the bedroom. Now, I'm sure a lot of you knew that this part of the video would be coming, and have been waiting for me to address this elephant in the room. So let's talk about it. Adult content. I'm not going to go into details or specifics here because I want this channel to be open to all ages, but the fact is that a lot of fanfic contains scenes, let's just say, of a mature nature. Not all fanfic does, and I think that is one of the big misconceptions. People that don't read fanfic assume that it's all porn, which isn't the case. And even stories that have adult content may also include complex plots, beautiful prose, amazing characterization. And you can find stories that are several 100,000 words long that just happen to have a handful of sex scenes thrown in there somewhere. Dismissing something because it has a few bits of adult content as just porn does it a disservice to the writing, especially given that there's plenty of mainstream fiction that includes adult scenes. That said, you do find stories in fanfic that are entirely about the sex. There are PWP fics, which stands for either plot what plot or porn without plot. Basically, the writer puts the characters together and adult stuff happens. Like the other stories, the quality and appeal of these stories is widely varied. A lot of writers use fanfic to explore their own sexuality or to explore kinks, to create a space for their own sexual interests in a way that's specific to them. There are people who find that their tastes aren't met by, say, normal porn, or who would prefer to see sexual acts as part of a larger narrative about characters who care for each other. And there are people who just want to read and write about sex. I'm not going to claim that all of this is good. There is some stuff in fanfic spaces that is seriously disturbing, and some stuff that portrays harmful ideas in a way that's meant to make it appealing. I am not going into that in this video, partly because I think it would warrant a whole video of its own to properly address the issues with that topic, but mostly because this video is supposed to be about the positive side of fanfic. So, focusing on that positive side, I think it's worth noting that there are a lot of stories that focus on the importance of equality in relationships. Characters in a sexual relationship are often depicted taking care to make sure that the other person isn't hurt, discussing their emotions, talking about how the sexual acts make them feel, what their interests are. Fanfics can show healthy discussions of boundaries and preferences in a way I have never witnessed in mainstream fiction. In terms of the reader's preferences, each reader, no matter how unusual their tastes, can probably find something written that will appeal to them, and if not, they can write it themselves. And there is a good chance that they'll find things they really want, and things that they really won't, which brings me to my next point, tagging. And this is more of a benefit of one particular site, but since Archive of Our Own, or AO3, is the biggest fanfiction repository out there, it deserves to have a place in this discussion. If you go to Archive of Our Own, you can search for fics based on tags. And this can be as broad as that you want to see stories based on a particular show or movie, or you can search for something really specific. If you want to read a story in which Peter Parker has a field trip to Stark Tower, there is a tag for that. If you really want to read a story where Obi-Wan Kenobi is a prince, there's a tag for that. And only 3 stories under that tag at the time I was putting this video together. But hey, you can find and read those 3 stories. Tagging lets you find things that meet your specific interests, but it also lets you avoid stuff. I don't generally like ABO fics. Not sure entirely why, I just don't. So I generally avoid them unless they are from an author whose other works I have read and enjoyed enough that I'm willing to take the chance that they'll tackle it in a way I can enjoy. But if I'm searching through archives of available stories for a fandom, I will choose to exclude the tags to do with ABO so that they won't show up in my research results. You can do that with stories that are just, hey, not my thing, but you can also do that with things that are triggering. You can exclude content with one of the archive's major warnings, or anything that's been tagged with something. The big warnings are for things like graphic violence, rape, underage sex, but authors will generally tag other things which they think might be troubling to readers as well, such as when a fic deals with a topic like eating disorders, suicidal thoughts, abuse. Archive of Our Own comes with filters that let you avoid seeing things that you know are an issue for you. I also find that most fanfic writers are generally good about including trigger warnings in the notes of their stories. They will warn you if they think a particular chapter is going to be an issue for a lot of readers. And this is not something you get with general fiction. And it's something that a lot of people need and appreciate. As a reader, you can curate your own experience and avoid seeing things that might be an issue for you, or that you just don't like. And I think that is very powerful. Another thing which I think is worth stressing is a point that I mentioned right at the start of this video. All of this is free. There are millions of stories on Archive of Our Own, and that is far from the only place on the internet where you can find fanfic. And these are sites available to anyone for free. The writers put the content out there, and the readers have access to it without paying a penny. And I think this is both a good and a bad thing. It's good because it's free. It's bad because the authors aren't being compensated for it. Sharing is seen as sharing with your community rather than selling a product. And community is a good word. There are events in different fandoms, like Rare Pair Weeks, when writers are encouraged to write and share stories featuring couples who don't get enough love in the fandom. There are events where fan artists will draw pictures to go with a fanfic, or fanfic writers will write a story to go with a piece of artwork. There are Secret Santa events at Christmas, where people will write stories as Christmas presents for other writers. And with all of this, there is this sense of sharing, of creating things, in exchange only for other acts of creation. You get writers gifting stories to each other, writing stories in response to another person's stories, putting together collab works which are exactly what they sound like. Collab works are stories written in collaboration between multiple authors. In general fiction, you do sometimes get books where a couple of writers have worked together in order to put a project out there, but it feels a lot rarer. You don't often get that same feeling of community outside of a few small pockets of writing groups and feedback circles. And I found recently, when you do get online communities through social media sites, it feels to me, and this may be my perception, but it feels like a lot of that community has grown up around fanfic writers, now spreading into the more general writing space as writers branch out. The fanfic writing community is this massive, sprawling, global thing, and I think that's amazing. The fanfic community and the art of writing fanfic is open to everyone. Anyone can get involved. Anyone can write a story. Anyone can share it online and get reviews and comments. This has its drawbacks sometimes when it comes to quality, but on the whole, this openness creates a space where anybody can put their creativity out into the world. Anyone can share their writing without gatekeepers or boundaries getting in the way. And this allows for stories that are so different or unusual that they just wouldn't get published traditionally. It allows for new writers to have a proving ground, to learn their skills and try things out. It allows for people to write or read the sort of stories that they enjoy, or to share their love of a work with other fans of that work by exploring possibilities far beyond what the original creators of that work might have intended. It is a wonderful creative space that allows for styles and approaches to writing that would be difficult in the world of original fiction. And above all, it's open to everyone. No matter who you are, you can write fanfiction and be part of this world. And I think that is fantastic. So, thank you for sticking with this video. As always, like and subscribe if you want to see more. And if you have any thoughts about the advantages of fanfiction, why you enjoy writing fanfiction or reading fanfiction, feel free to leave a note in the comment. And I'll see you next time.